It is 1989, the month of April, the second day, and we're headed to shrinking hours and moving into the daytime schedule. And that was something that just touched the heart and soul in this month of April. A theme entitled Gray and Visceral. And on the business end of the percussion, Bill Goodwin, who participated with John Schofield, the guitarist, Bill Dobbins, the pianist, and Steve Gilmore and Steve Swallow, the bassists. Bill Goodwin is in Minnesota at the moment. He has just come off stand at the Artist Quarter with Billy Peterson and his colleague Hal Galper, the pianist, and I want to welcome him to Minnesota Public Radio.
Hi.
Good to have you there.
I'm here, Leigh. Thank you. It's nice to be in Minnesota. It's nice to be on Minnesota Public Radio.
Well, to have you on this terra firma is a privilege for all of us because you are a communicator in the field of percussion, and I wonder if you didn't start out in your booties beating pots and pans.
That's exactly how I started out, as a matter of fact. I had, kind of obligatory piano lessons as a child, and my family were very musically oriented. There's always music in the house, but I think I truly my first percussion experience probably was lining up these pots and pans on a window seat, near the piano part of the house that I grew up in, and probably playing along with Gene Krupa, on Sing 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 or some such selection. I was very influenced by that.
Were you influenced by Gene Krupa?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think he was probably the first drummer that I really, as a child, that I really liked. And I loved the Benny Goodman band, and I loved the big bands particularly. And I think there were a lot of those kind of records in the house, and I probably listened to them a lot. I seem to remember doing that very thing. And I think I had an old set of bongo drums or something that I used to fool around with. But I was taking piano lessons as a kid, and then I got very fascinated by the tenor saxophone, and I played that for a few years. I was not very effective on the tenor sax, and I eventually taught myself to play the drums, just really from being inspired by the music that I was hearing around me, and particularly at that time, I was about 12 or 13 years old. I heard Shelly Manne for the first time. I guess I had heard him before, but I realized who it was and what he was doing, and I thought it was the most beautiful sound that I had ever heard. I was at the movies, and the film was The Man with the Golden Arm, starring Frank Sinatra as a drummer, an aspiring drummer who had a problem with drugs. And the opening music in that film was Shelly Manne playing a hi-hat solo, a simple, hi-hat beat, cymbal beat on the hi-hat, but it was like a big light went on, in my head. And I know I was around 12, between 12 and 13 years old. And I think it was that moment when I decided that I was, going to be a drummer. Little did I know.
And what do you mean by that?
Do I know? But that was sort of it. It was it seemed like a natural thing. I recall that as a teenager, when I told my mother that I was seriously going to pursue this as a career, she was, of course, thrilled and appalled at the same time. She loved the music, but was really worried that I would be able to sustain myself in that profession. But she's after I worked the first couple of good gigs with people that she had heard of, then she was behind me all the way from that point on.
Well, you certainly come from a family that was well aware of what the environment of show business was about.
Oh yeah.
Your father, for some of our listeners out there who grew up on genuine radio before television, probably remember a man by the name of Bill Goodwin Sr., and you might just describe his career in 3,000 words or less.
Well, yeah, his dad was he was the original, or one of the original two or three, personality announcers in radio. At that time, they would integrate the commercials right into the action of the show. So, for example, when he was selling carnation milk on the Burns and Allen show, then he would show up, at some point during the action for some reason, but always, end up bringing the conversation around to the subject of, what you could do with carnation milk, or Chesterfield cigarettes, or whatever whoever the sponsor happened to be, because every radio show had one sponsor in those days. It wasn't like commercials are now. For people who might be listening that don't remember radio, it was really kind of a very entertaining medium, in that sense, when it was, when there were all the different, variety shows and adventure shows and mystery shows and all those things. So he was basically a well-known, familiar voice. I think people, who never saw what he looked like, still would recognize his voice, if they heard it on the radio.
Well, he certainly was an important part of the Burns and Allen and Bob Hope shows.
Well, absolutely, yeah, it was an integral part of the show. He would do the opening and closing announcements, and he would do the commercials. But he'd also appear in the sketches, and you remember that the way it used to be. There were only a few guys that kind of started that thing, and it was my dad and Don Wilson and I think and Wendell Niles, the guys on the West Coast. And
yes, he was a West Coaster, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was based in Los Angeles. He started in radio in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland. Grew up in Oakland, California, and was a native Californian. And started in radio, like sweeping up the local radio station in Oakland, and just happened to, was doing announcing on the, local radio, and just happened to be there in the beginning of network radio. They had the red and blue network, I think, at that time, and one became NBC and one became CBS. I think they were both NBC at one time, and then they split, and one became CBS. I'm not sure of that.
Or ABC, is the case.
I was probably unborn at that point. But
well, your father must have opened the door for you as far as jazz performance is concerned. His love of show business and participating in it.
Well, he was a jazz lover. Yeah, my mother too. They were. They both. We had many friends who were musicians and singers and songwriters, and a lot of people. Would be in the house. They would have parties, and there was always music was always a part of, our daily life. And there were always jazz records in the house. I mean, I was listening to music as long as I can remember without really knowing, why I liked it. It was just something that was always there that I enjoyed. I was hearing, all the big bands, particularly Goodwin and the Dorsey Band, and of course Duke Ellington and they had all of the Louis Armstrong records, the Hot Fives, and the duets with Earl Hines, and all that great stuff. We were listening all the time.
So that historic.
Later on, that they had all the Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie records. I didn't even know. I thought I got into Dave Brubeck when I was about 12 or 13. And I thought I was really hip. And the folks said, "Well, we think Dave's okay, but it's a little depressing. And, why don't you, check this out?" And they played me, Bird with Strings.
So you have progressed all the way, Bill Goodwin. And, those sessions that you did and developed out of Pennsylvania on the Omnisound label, those projects were certainly challenging and on the cutting edge, especially your colleagues, too.
Well, hopefully that whole experience and that whole period was one of discovery for me. And I had just gotten the idea, basically, around 1978, 79, that I wanted to start producing records. I had been actually making records since I was about 18 years old. And at that, I don't know why I didn't think about it before, but I was, I used to go to sessions and I would, play, and it was just a part of what you did as being a professional musician. You would do record dates from time to time. And so I was very familiar with, that end of the recording, and I had worked with a lot of producers, and I'd done a lot of sessions, spent a lot of time in the studio, and it just came over me one day during a session that I wanted to produce records myself, and I just started sort of thrashing around in the business, and at that point I was already working with Phil Wood's quartet, and we didn't have a producer. We had a producer, and we broke with him, and it was kind of a void, and I was able to fill it. I mean, I basically asked the guys in the band if I could, function as a producer, and I produced tapes that became 2 albums, and both of them were nominated for Grammys, and one of them won a Grammy Award. And I guess the guys in the band thought that I must know something, and I, was sort of able to do it and learn about it, and I through a friend of mine, Fred Waring Jr., who was running the Omnisound label, was a division of a big publishing company that was started by his father. They had a little label going, and he wanted to expand and do some different projects, and he knew that I was well connected with the musicians, and basically gave me some jobs, and it kind of just went from there. Eventually ended up acquiring the label along with a few other people who invested in it, like myself and about 6 other people, and we had a pretty good run there for about 3 or 4 years. Right now, the label is inactive, but my hope is that it will become active again in the future.
Bill Goodwin, I want to ask you a question. It's slightly off the wall. You don't have to answer it.
Oh, I don't mind.
As a percussionist, a drummer in a jazz group, can you make a comparison to a position on a baseball or a football team, the drummer's role, interchangeable?
Well, probably the catcher.
In baseball?
In baseball, the drummer would be like the catcher, the backstop. You're basically, I think the catcher often is the person who's really calling the plays because he's got the overview. And on the drums, I'm sitting behind the drums, and I'm kind of in a position sort of behind everybody else, and I'm supporting them from behind. I'm watching like the play, all going on around me, and I'm not exactly calling the plays, but it's like I have the job of making sure everybody gets the signals right, and making sure everybody gets to hear themselves and like knows where they are, and so I would say the catcher.
Bill Goodwin, thanks for taking time after the gig, after the ball, and it's a pleasure talking with you and renewing again.
Thank you.
See you on stand at 8 o'clock at the Artist Quarter tonight in Minneapolis at 26th and Nicollet.
All right.